All right, class. First off, as always, good day and glad you're here. So, this video is basically the next part of the lesson we did in class, or if you weren't in class and you watched the other video, it's the second half of it. We're going to be talking about the convention, the Constitutional Convention, and mainly one of the most important things that happened there, um, which was an issue that is going to plague the country for another, like 50 some years. And it would bring us to the boiling point of our country. And it would bring us to the brink of, you know, war. All right. So we're going to be talking about that. So be sure you pay attention because, again, for the next like month or so, the issue of slavery is going to be talked about in the foreground, background. Um, it's going to be talked about quite a bit, so get used to it. Okay, so let's start the lesson. All right, so again, you have the essential questions, which are the same as last time. What are the impact of different cultures in the overall North American culture? Would our country have survived if the Articles of Confederation was not removed? Why was the admiration of George Washington helpful in starting our country? Okay, we're going to be getting to that. Not this video, but more than likely either the next video or the one after that. Okay. Today's lesson, you guys are going to analyze the problems that the issue of slavery brought and critique the Three-Fifths Compromise. So we're going to be talking about it, and you guys are basically going to decide, was that the best deal we can get, type of thing. So I want you guys to have that in your mind. Was that the best deal that we could do? Is that the best we can negotiate? Okay. All right, so here is your warm-up picture. Now, the thing is, this picture, it's actually for an event that happens later on, not necessarily right now at the beginning of our country. But the picture is absolutely amazing. It tells a great story, and how some people saw the issue of slavery. So, um, look at the picture, analyze it. What do you see? All right. And then what do you think this artist is trying to say, about slavery? So again, the question's on the Google Doc, so go ahead and answer that. All right. Uh, Pause the video if you're writing right now, but if you're done, we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So the Articles of Confederation sucked. So if you watched the last video, if you were in class, you know how bad it was. You heard me explain just how terrible it was, and I think in class I think I did a better job explaining it. But in May 1787, every state except Rhode Island sent delegates to Philadelphia. Now remember, Philadelphia is basically the capital of our nation at that time. Washington, D.C. was not around. It was just basically like a marshland. Um, but Philadelphia was our hub when it comes to our country. It was the capital, right? And the whole purpose of this gathering was to revise the Articles of Confederation. All right. So if you don't know what revision means, it's basically you have what you had, but now you're trying to make it better. Okay. Now, as soon as the delegates got there, they basically said, you know what? This thing sucks. This thing is horrible. There's very little good things that we can actually use because it was a horrible disaster. So let's basically throw it out and start with a brand new framework for our government. And that's where they started off at. Okay. They basically said, nothing's useful here, just let's start anew. So there were 55 delegates, and many of them were known as being distinguished leaders. Right? They were well respected in their states and in other states. Um, and the meeting became known as the Constitutional Convention. All right, now a lot of you guys may have heard that term before, the Constitutional Convention. This is what they're talking about. And some people think that the Constitutional Convention is where the Constitution was created, and that's the beginning of our country. They tend to forget about the Articles of Confederation, and that came first. Okay, so that might be a question on your test. Which came first, the Articles of Confederation or the Constitutional Convention? It's the Articles. Okay, so in that Constitutional Convention, the people were like, okay, we need someone to lead this place. We need somebody who is like, if everyone got together, they'd be like, okay, hey, guys need to calm down. You need to, take a minute. We need some person who can set up the rules and things like that, and make sure everyone follows. Everybody basically like turned their heads towards George Washington, and Washington's like, cool, yeah, I can do it. Because again, everyone respected George Washington. They admired him. They loved him, right? And they knew he was a man of his word and things like that. He wasn't really going to play favoritism. You know, so they're like, dude, Washington. So Washington is now the head of the convention. He's basically making sure that everyone follows the rules, that they're um, they're keeping it civil and things like that, right? Other famous people that were there, Benjamin Franklin. You see him in that picture right there. And behind him, Alexander Hamilton. Okay? James Madison was there, as well as other delegates and stuff like that. Um, but the thing is, it was like a who's who of our country, and these guys became known as our framers. Okay. All right. So we come to your first question, and is why do you think every state except Rhode Island sent some person or people, to represent them at this point of revising the articles? Why would they send somebody? Why would each state, like I said, except one, Rhode Island, why would they send people to go there? You know, why would they send like a group of people or a couple of people or one person to go represent their state? So what would be the purpose of that? Okay, so there's a writing prompt. Be sure you write it. So pause the video. Once you're finished, unpause it, and we'll be moving on in three, two, one. Okay, now there's a couple things that I took out in this lecture for time purposes. Also, it didn't really have much to do with the lesson, but there was rules that Washington made sure like no one could, talk to the press and things like that. Nobody could meet unless there was a certain amount of people at that meeting. They couldn't do like backroom deals and things like that. It's like no, whenever was being said, a majority of the people had to be there to hear it, and when they voted, people had to be there. It could be like let's secretly make have a vote and get this thing passed. It's like no, no, they had to be sure that's the best democratic way to proceed. Okay, so that's what Washington did. Now, here comes the debates and the compromises. But there's three things that each delegate agreed on. There's no, well, we should, no. All these three things, all the delegates agree on, all 55 of them. The government needed more power to gather taxes. That's number one. Okay, they learned their lesson on that. Number two, to make laws that would bind the states, you know, so that's like, oh, well, this state, you can do this, but you guys over here, you guys can't. So they had laws that would bind upon the states. Okay. The next one is government should be broken up into three branches. Again, looking back at Massachusetts, the way they had their constitution, you know, and they were like, that's a really good idea to have the three branches, you know, because if you have two and one decides one and one decides the other, then you're at a stalemate. If you have one branch, that's it. It's just what they say. It becomes like a kind of like a king dictatorship type of thing. But three, it would have to be it'd be pretty good, because they would all have to agree, or two of three would have to agree, things like that. Um, the thing is, there were a lot of issues that the delegates could not agree on. One of the big ones was should each state have an equal vote? Okay, because some states were a lot smaller than others, you know. Um, excuse me, like a state like Rhode Island, small, they're saying that Rhode Island should have the same power as, let's say, Pennsylvania, which is at least like 10 times bigger. And it's like, wait, there's more people um in, let's say, in Pennsylvania than there are in Rhode Island. There's a heck of a lot more. So are you saying that those people who live in that state, their voice is worth less than those people in Rhode Island? So small states like this idea, like, yeah, we should be equal. We all should be equal. And then the larger states, basically, just like I said earlier, like, no. Our people, we have, yeah, just because we have our state is bigger and we have a lot more people, does that make it that our citizens are worth less than yours because you're in a smaller state? That makes no sense. We have more people there, and we live in a democracy where when the people speak, it's listened to. So we should have more power because we have more people. So there's already an issue. So now I'm asking you before we move on, should every state be equal regardless of the amount of land they have or the amount of citizens they have? Should they be equal or shouldn't they? Because you have to remember too, if a state is really big, they can dictate what happens to a small state as well. So look at it from both sides. And like I said, remember, this is the time where you're supposed to pull yourself out of your own personal thing and look at the whole situation and basically decide what's fair. So look at the whole situation from both sides, from both angles, and decide for yourself which one is more fair. Okay, so go ahead and write that out, pause the video, but we'll be moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so this guy right here, Roger Sherman, he was from Connecticut. He suggested that Congress be a bicameral. So he's saying, okay, yeah, we're going to have the judicial, the executive, the legislative, and that's where Congress is. He goes, but that should be two. That one branch should split in two. One being the House of Representatives, right? So the House of Representatives would be based off of population. So the more people you have, the more powerful your state is in the House of Representatives. Now that's one branch, okay? That's one. The other side he's saying is the Senate. And no matter how big or how small your state is, each state gets 2 senators, okay? No matter how big or small. And in order for Congress, that one branch, in order for something to pass, both of those smaller branches inside of it have to agree. All right. So if, let's say, the bigger states are agreeing to something, a law, and they're like, yeah, we like that, but it hurts the small states on this side can stop that. Because again, both sides have to agree. Okay, so that's where it, again, remember, just think of it like a tree, one branch, and it splits out, splits in two. That's the Congress, that's legislative branch. Okay. The eligible voters in each state would elect members of the House of Representatives. So the people vote for their representative, the people who they want to represent them at the federal level, they pick them. And he's saying, and for the senators, the state legislature people, the people who are already in the state's legislature, they pick the senators, not the citizens. Okay. This became known as the Great Compromise. All right, it's also known as the Connecticut Compromise, but I won't, have you remember that. But I want you to remember the Great Compromise. That's where, again, legislature is split in 2 branches, one that favors small states, one that favors big states. Okay. So Roger Sherman and all these other guys who were like, oh my God, we're in a pickle. As soon as they got this compromise, they're like, yeah, all right. Now, unsuspecting to them brought another controversy. and that's state population and slavery. So remember, population equals power in the House of Representatives. Okay. Now, the thing is, the slave holding states in the South, they wanted the slaves to count as a person. So for every slave, that counts as a person. Why? Because remember, they want more power in the House of Representatives. Now, the North, a lot of the northern states who are against slavery and things like that, they basically said, wait a minute, you want them to be counted as a person, right? Yeah, we want them to be counted as a person. Do they have the rights as a person, like you or me and things like that? No, they don't. Okay. So they don't have the rights, the God given rights as a person. They don't have the rights of the people of our country, but you want to count them as a person, but they're not treated as a person. And the South is basically like, yeah. And this is where the fighting begins. Okay. So you get what the North is saying? Like you want them to count as people, but you don't treat them like people, and they don't have freedom like people. But the South wants them to be counted as people because that'll give them more power. Even though they know themselves, they don't treat them like the average Joe. I would say average white Joe. Okay. So they started trying to compromise because the thing is, all this arguing they're doing, the country is still going through the recession that we talked about in the last video and in the last lecture. Um, the country's going more and more into debt. The states that printed out the money, they're going more and more in debt. Um, People are getting upset. People are losing their jobs. People's money is being worth basically nothing. People are getting angry. So they like, okay, we need to try to solve this thing. So they kind of do a temporary patch. Basically, they say, okay, how about this? Instead of uh, a slave counting as a whole person, how about 25%? And the South like, no, how about 75%? 33, 66, 50, 60%. Okay, we could do that. And that's where the 3/5 compromise comes in. Because remember, if you're taking math, 3/5 equals 60%. Okay, so for every 5 slaves, it counted as 3 white people. Okay. Another stipulation that came in was that the South said, okay, well, how about this too? You can't put any high taxes on us, on the slave trade, things like that. And they go, okay. And here's another thing. We want to put a ban on the slave trade. Oh, a complete ban? No, that's not gonna work. How about till like 1808? Okay, we could do that. 1808. So they have like less than 20 years to get slaves in. Okay, and this is the compromise they came up with. Now the thing is, guys, this is the beginning of the boiling teapot scenario thing I give in or tell you guys about. Think of like a teapot on a stove. The light or the fire is barely turned on. So right now, the water inside is starting to heat up a little bit, right? Because they put a temporary patch on this problem of slavery. They didn't solve it. It's just a temporary thing to get the country going. But as you're going to see in the next several weeks and months, that it's going to climb, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse to the point where war is inevitable. Okay. All right, so here is my question to you. What do you think would have happened to the United States had the 3/5 compromise if it never was reached? Okay, they were still arguing things like that. Now remember, like I told you, country can't pay our bills because they can't collect taxes from people. There's no money really coming into the country because other countries are like, dude, you haven't paid us our money, but yet you want money from us? And the stuff people are wanting to buy, they put a block on it So things like resources and food starts to spoil. Things are being stocked up. They're not selling. So a lot of that stuff doesn't last that long. Some of that stuff it'll last, but it's gonna like not be as good quality as if it was fresh. You know. So what do you think would happen? How do you think the citizens would react? Now remember, like I said, the value of the money was getting less and less and less and less and less. And so what would have cost $1 now costs $55. Things like that. Okay, so tell me, what do you think citizens would have reacted, and how would the country? I mean, how would the country be if the three-fifths compromise was not reached? Okay, so go ahead and answer that question. Um, Gonna move on in three, two, one. All right, so now we're at the exit ticket. So tell me something that you learned today. Now, again, guys, like I said, I do apologize because there was a lot of stuff on this that I wanted to break down and tell you, but then this video would not be 21 minutes, it'd be like 55 minutes. And I'm not gonna do that, because again, I want to teach you guys, but I want to teach you guys the main things, and then the smaller stuff, if you guys want to talk about it, I could show you how you guys watch a video, things like that on it, because I really wish I could, but I don't have the time. And I know a lot of you guys don't want to sit here listening to me talk. Okay. So, again, tell me what you learned. Share with me any ideas, thoughts you had, comments you have. Okay. Other than that, we're done. So, you guys take care. Have a good day. Be safe.